Colleagues from the media, good afternoon, and I hope that you are all well. We have just concluded the first day of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Retreat. This is the first ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting this year under Indonesia's chairmanship. This also the first ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting attended by the new ASEAN Secretary General, His Excellency Kau Kim Horn. To kick off, earlier this morning, all ASEAN foreign ministers paid a courtesy call to President Joko Widodo at Istana Merdeka. In the meeting, President Jokowi underlined two important points. First, ASEAN must not be a proxy to any side. ASEAN centrality and unity must be safeguarded and maintained as our main modality. At the same time, President also underlined the importance of upholding principles of democracy, law, and human rights in line with the ASEAN Charter. The second message of President Jokowi is that ASEAN must continue to become an epicentrum of growth. This can only be achieved if political stability and regional peace is maintained. President Jokowi appreciated the support of all ASEAN member states and look forward to the attendance of leaders to the upcoming ASEAN summits. Now, I would like to share some points of the two meetings that we had today, namely a working lunch to discuss a review of implementation of 5 points of consensus and the 32nd ASEAN Coordinating Council, or ACC. Colleagues from the media, I would like to start with the working lunch. The meeting is dedicated to discuss the Myanmar issue in an open, in-depth, and frank manner as one family. I briefed the meeting on the Indonesia approaches on Myanmar as chair. For Indonesia, the 5 points of consensus is the main reference to address the Myanmar crisis. In this regard, Indonesia will put forward 3 approaches. First, engage all stakeholders as a first step to facilitate possibilities of an inclusive national dialogue. I also share my initial engagement with all stakeholders. Second, build conducive conditions to pave the way for an inclusive dialogue. 2 important issues for conducive condition. One is reducing violence and continuation of humanitarian assistance for all needed. These 2 conditions are paramount to build trust and confidence. And third, synergize ASEAN efforts with neighboring, concerned countries, and special envoy of the UN and other countries. All members during the working lunch rendered their full support to the approaches of Indonesia in addressing the situation in Myanmar. During the working lunch, we discussed and agreed to urge significant progress in the implementation of 5 points of consensus to pave the way for inclusive national dialogue in Myanmar. That inclusive dialogue is key to find a peaceful resolution to the situation in Myanmar. And conducive environment should be created for an inclusive dialogue by reducing violence and ensuring timely and unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance. During the working lunch, the foreign ministers reiterated the united approach. I repeat, the united approach in addressing the situation in Myanmar through the 5 points of consensus. The second meeting today is the 32nd ACC. The 32nd ACC is historic as we welcome Timor-Leste participation in ASEAN meeting for the first time. I congratulated Minister Adalziza Magno of Timor-Leste on this occasion. One of the main agenda of the ACC is to brief the meeting on Indonesia chairmanship priorities and deliverables throughout the year. In this regard, I brief on 3 pillars of Indonesia chairmanship. First pillar is on ASEAN matters. I stress ASEAN needs to remain relevant by maintaining its centrality and becoming an anchor of stability and regional prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, I also underline the need to have a forward-looking ASEAN with a strong capacity to anticipate and address future challenges. In this context, Indonesia will propose initiatives to strengthen ASEAN readiness to address current and future challenges toward 2045, institutionalize dialogue on human rights, and enhance ASEAN cooperation to prevent and combat trafficking in persons. Second pillar is on epicentrum of growth. In line with this, ASEAN needs to ensure a region of inclusive, robust, and sustainable economic growth. Under this pillar, Indonesia will propose an outcome that will attain ASEAN region as epicentrum of growth. For main aspect that will be our focus, namely strengthening ASEAN health architecture, strengthening food security, including ensuring robust supply chains and facilitation of trade, ensuring energy security to support transition from fossil energy to clean and renewable energy, among others, by developing regional electric vehicle ecosystem and strengthening financial stability to further ensure resilience of our economy against future external shock. And the third pillar of our chairmanship is on the implementation of ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. As mandated by our leaders, Indonesia will push for the follow-up on mainstreaming the 4 priority areas of AOIP. Indonesia will identify a list of concrete projects for implementation of AOIP that will include all ASEAN partners. Our chairmanship will also strengthen ASEAN relations with the Pacific through establishing a secretariat-to-secretariat cooperation between ASEAN and PIF. I also conveyed that Indonesia will also convene several flagship events under the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum to implement ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which include Youth Dialogue on Digital Development for SDG that will be convened in April, the Creative Economy Forum in August, Infrastructure Forum, and ASEAN Business and Investment Summit that will be held back-to-back with the 43rd ASEAN Summit in September. Colleagues, in the beginning of the meeting of the ACC, ASEAN Secretary General briefed the meeting regarding operationalization of recommendation on strengthening ASEAN capacity and institutional effectiveness, and then modalities of Timor-Leste participation in ASEAN meetings, and look forward to ACC guidance on the roadmap and the importance of ASEAN member states to seize potential of the blue economy. Now, the outcomes of the ACC meeting, among others. First, the ACC adopted the guidelines for the implementation of observer status granted to Timor-Leste in ASEAN. And we adopted also the revised TOR of the ACC Working Group on Timor-Leste. The ACC also tasked the ACC Working Group on Timor-Leste to work on draft roadmap for Timor-Leste full membership. Second, the ACC endorsed the HLTF High-Level Task Force on Economic Integration to develop an ASEAN Blue Economy Framework. Third, the ACC tasked SOM to explore the establishment of SOM working group with a mandate to strengthen ASEAN decision-making process. And fourth, the ACC tasked CPR to review TOR of the CPR and finalize TOR of EAS Ambassadors meeting in Jakarta, and then discuss the revision of modalities for chair of ASEAN and ASEAN sectoral bodies to host meetings at ASEAN Secretariat, and also to address the funding issue. The ACC also agreed that the COVID-19 Response Fund will be expanded into ASEAN Response Fund for public health emergencies and emerging diseases, or in short, we call it ASEAN Response Fund. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, aside from those meetings today, I have also bilateral meetings with Foreign Minister of Thailand yesterday and with Brunei Darussalam this afternoon. In the meetings, we discussed development in Myanmar, Indonesia approaches, and Indonesia priorities, as well as deliverables in our chairmanship. We also discussed various bilateral issues of common concerns, among others the cooperation on economic, investment, law enforcement, maritime connectivity, and domestic migrant workers. So that is all that I can say for today, and tomorrow morning we will have the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Retreat that will start very early in the morning. So I thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you.